I am going to call to order at 8:33, special meeting of the Reno Sparks Convention and Visitors Authority, and I'm going to ask for a roll call. Madam Clerk?
Chair Bybee?
Here.
Mayor Sheevy?
Here.
Commissioner Bob Lucy? Absent. Mr. Stephen Esquaga?
Here.
Mr. Andy Chapman?
Here.
Ms. Shannon Keel is absent today. Mr. Murdoch?
Here.
Ms. Ann Silver is absent. Ms. Jessica Sferraza? You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let's go ahead and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And could I get Deborah, would you like to lead us in the pledge this morning? You just have to start it, and then we'll all join you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead on to item B, comments from the floor by the public. Do we have any comments from the public, Madam Clerk?
None at this time, thank you.
Okay, at this time, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to item C, approval of the agenda of the August 25th, 2022 special meeting of the Board of Directors. Looking for a motion?
I'd like to make that motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Murdoch. Do I have a second? I have a second by Ms. Sferraza. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item D, approval of the minutes of the July 14th meeting of the Board of Directors. Do I have any corrections, additions, or a motion to approve? Okay, I have a motion for approval by Member Sferraza. Do I have a second? I have a second by Member Murdoch. All those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item E.
Madam Chair, I'm
review-
going to abstain.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'll abstain. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'll abstain. I'm not in the attendance.
Okay, that's right, Andy, you were not here, so we'll mark Member Chapman as an abstention from that vote. Thank you, Andy. Let's move on to item E, review, discussion, and possible action regarding an exception to human resources policies 900.901 and 900-903. The Board of Directors will be asked to authorize an exception to human resource policies that I just mentioned to allow former employees who were employed by the RSCVA in the Facilities Department prior to the outsourcing of facility operations and through June 16, 2018, to retain their previous RSCVA hire date for purposes of sick accruals, vacation accruals, and retirement benefits if they are rehired by the RSCVA by December 31st, 2022. Mr. Harris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So some background information. Back in March, as part of the facilities transition, the Board of Directors approved allowing employees to retain their original hire dates if the employees were, one, laid off by the RSCVA in 2018 due to the facilities outsourcing, number two, were employed by ASM Global on June 1st, 2022, and three, received an offer of employment from RSCVA due to the facilities transition. With this agenda item, we are extending this policy exception to facility employees who were laid off by the RSCVA in 2018 due to the facilities outsourcing, but did not maintain employment with ASM Global throughout the entire outsourcing period. We are requesting that any facilities employees who were laid off in 2018 who received an offer of employment in the facilities department by December 31st, 2022 to retain their hire dates for the purposes of retirement benefits, sick time accruals, and vacation time accruals. With that, I'll turn that over to Molly just for a quick additional and then back to the board for questions.
Good morning, Molly Rezak for the record. I would just like to add that, as it was stated, in March of this year, the board did approve that exception for employees that were transferring over from ASM Global. Due to the tight labor market, continuing ongoing open positions, it is requested that that exception be expanded to employees that were at the RSCVA at the time of the facility transition to SMG at that point in time in 2018. So they worked up and retained their employment and assisted with the transition. And then they left and did other things. They were not at work at ASM Global at the time that we took the facilities back. We do have some key positions open, and we have some long-term RSCVA former employees that have expressed some desire to come back. But this is obviously a key point for them. And so the request is really to allow the RCVA staff to be able to hire and fill those positions with very qualified people for some of these key skilled positions. And so they're simply requesting to expand that exception through the end of the year to allow these other employees potentially to be hired back on, fill those positions for the RCVA so they can provide the best service at the facilities. And I'll ask or answer any questions.
Okay. Do I have any questions? Member Sferrazza?
Yeah, I really want to thank Mayor Rcba, but also our CEO for doing this, because this was a big issue even before I got here, was the benefits for the employees. And I think this is awesome. Because I wasn't here on the board when you guys had to make those tough decisions to lay off the crew. But to bring them back, benefits are really important to these folks. And if we can, retain that expertise too and bring them back to the organization, this is super cool. So thank you, Charles. I'm glad to see this on the agenda today.
Thank you. Member Squazza?
Thank you. Also, I agree. I think it's a real positive. Just for clarification, with the 10 positions or 10 individuals, is that including those that are kind of waiting to see to come on, or
So that is an estimate of who may be impacted by this additional exception. It may be less, it may be very slightly more, because you also have attrition that may occur throughout the year, and we might have somebody come. So we wanted to make it so, but we do not estimate there to be much, if any, financial impact. Actually, in some cases, it may actually benefit the RSCVA based upon how those benefits and retiree benefits, et cetera, go. So it would be pretty minor.
And to Molly's point, tapping into the expertise that these folks have, that we don't have to retrain, we don't have to go out and look for people. It is an absolute benefit in this labor market for us to be able to get those folks in here.
Well, and I would just like to echo what everybody else is saying, too. We know, it doesn't matter where you work or what business you have, today the labor market is so tight. Incentives that we can find or just a way to keep people or to bring people back just makes full sense, and even better that there are people that'll fit in with what we're doing, that know what they're doing, and like to Charles' point, not having to retrain someone, but bringing quality individuals back. But also making sure that they have those the benefits, and that's incentive to keep them, and to keep them here too, because when we have good employees, all of us, no matter our businesses, really have to make sure we hang on to them right now in this competitive labor market. So thank you for this item. I think it's going to benefit not only those employees, which is super important, but also the RCVA as well. Any other comments, Mayor Rcva or Mr. Chapman?
Oh, no, thank you so much. I think everyone said it beautifully. And thank you for doing this. Important.
I agree, and I would move approval of the motion as stated in the staff report.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I will second.
Okay, I have a motion by Member Chapman and a second by Mayor Rcva. Any discussion? All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the main reason for our meeting today, our special meeting, is item F, review and possible approval of survey questions to be utilized in connection with the Reno-Sparks Convention and Visitors Authority Annual President CEO Review. The RCVA Board of Directors is being asked to review, possibly revise, and approve the executive staff and Board of Directors survey questions presented by the Executive and Legislative Committee to be utilized in connection with the annual RSCVA President CEO review. Mr. Murdoch is chair of this committee. Would you like to open our comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we spent about 2 hours on this, going through both set of questions. I think it's pretty easy. One is a merit review, and the other is determined about the bonus. And it's interesting because there was a lot of questions that the committee felt that were redundant. And again, no, I don't want you to think that we're not opposed to anything on here. We just wanted to get it cleaned up for you all. And then if you believe there's something missing or add it, or you didn't like something, we'd be all open to that. This is purely just our recommendations. And again, it was about a 2-hour process, and we got there, and I felt good about it. And so please, but feel like you can say whatever you need to say and do whatever you need to do if you want something better than these board survey questions. Also, Charles, you spoke during that last meeting and were able to, you got to tell us that exactly what you thought about and your peers, and so it's on record, and we appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. And as a member of that subcommittee, we did hammer out, went through, and especially the ones for the board were really, some questions were like, they had 3 different statements in them. So it really was like, okay, so what do I agree or disagree? Because there's 3 different things in this statement. So a lot of cleaning up, a lot of trying to be more concise. I think I took my English minor to heart in looking at the language and how we stated it, and really just being concise, clear, not redundant. Some questions just kept being asked in different formats. So the survey itself, and we heard that last year, was a little awkward, and people had trouble last year with the survey because it really it needed the work that I feel like the subcommittee did do and spent a length of time trying to do that. And really, we took all of your input because we did ask all the board to give us input on what questions they liked, what they didn't, what their focus was, and we did take that into account when we were making the decisions on what we wanted to just clean up, eliminate, what didn't make sense, because it was redundant, and that's how we came up with what we did. And I'm going to let Mr. Kennedy, from a legal perspective, maybe brief us, and then I'll open it up to questions or comments. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I don't have a lot to add other than to, just so everybody's clear, prior to the meeting of the committee, I asked the board to send me their questions, comments, et cetera, and I would compile them and present them to the committee. Every question, every comment or change that I got, I put in a memo and sent to the committee. So if you had a recommendation or a comment that you don't see incorporated here, it was presented to the committee and discussed at that committee meeting, and the committee did their best to sort of accommodate all the issues, and in your materials is what we've come up with. So with that, I will pass it back to you, Madam Chair.
Maybe on what we're allowed to discuss, or if there's not discussion.
Sure. So, also just to remind everybody, so we're agendized here today to discuss the questions. We're not here to address Mr. Harris' performance or answer these questions at the meeting here today. We're just establishing the question set. Once these questions are approved, we'll assemble a survey. It'll go out in the coming days, and at our regular meeting in September, we'll go through the answers to the questions and conduct Mr. Harris' review.
Okay, thank you,
And
Mr. Murdoch.
if I may ask Mr. Kennedy, it also is part of his contract, the way that this process is following the guidelines is part of the contract that he signed and we signed with him, correct?
Correct. So Mr. Harris' contract, there's an exhibit to his contract, and I apologize, I don't think it's in your materials here today, that talks about his review process. And these are 2 elements of his contractual review process. One of them is a board survey, and one is a survey of the executive staff. So that's what his contract provides for.
So, Mr. Kennedy, on that same note, any changes that we would want to make, whether who is surveyed, whether we do the survey or just the objective side that we've already, the goals and objectives, is something that would require a renegotiation of Mr. Harris's contract. We're pretty much bound by what the contract states, and how this procedure and review goes is set up in his contract. So if we wanted changes for next year, we can relook at the contract and decide if we want adjustments to be made. But right now, we're working under a contract, so legally, we're bound to what the contract states our procedure should be.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments? Ms. Frazza?
Madam Chair?
Oh, Mr. Okay. Mr. Chapman?
Thank you. My question, and I understand from the contract component and something we can look at in the future, but Ben, maybe can you explain how is the staff survey questions that we have here, how were those incorporated into the board's conversation about the merit review? Because to me, it's, and perhaps this is how we did it in the past, and perhaps I just missed it, but to me, it's a little odd that we would, as a board, look at staff input. Not that that's not important, and I'm not saying that staff input isn't important, but how we use that in the review of the CEO when we look at goals and objectives, and how that information gets incorporated into that conversation. Maybe some clarity there.
And I'll take that question. So under the policy, there are 2 surveys that are done, and the questions you see here. One is to the board, and all the board answers that. Another is to executive staff. They are basically tools, and they're information that is compiled by legal counsel. It's a Survey Monkey. So you have a Survey Monkey report that says, so many people responded in this manner, and here were the comments. They're not attributed to any specific person. It's just a report. It is a tool for the board to look at and to use as they come into the meeting in September for the CEO review. So it is part of the packet. It is just information for the board to be able to conduct their merit review of the CEO. And I like to just make sure that everybody knows our goals and objectives that we work with the CEO goals. Those are incentive goals and relate to the bonus. There's 2 parts to the contract and the way the policy is set forth. First is the merit. How well does somebody do the job of CEO in general? And then the board sets these incentive goals. Here are the goals that we absolutely want you to meet, and this is what you will therefore get bonused on. But we all probably understand that the job of the CEO is broader than what we set forth in those 5 to 7 goals, or however many there are. So really, the surveys are just a tool that when the board had set forth this policy and procedure for the CEO review, they wanted to see that information to be able to conduct the review in the public meeting as required by statute.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Chapman?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments? Ms. Frazza?
Yeah, I do have 2, and I first want to thank the committee for their work. Number 8, I just think that one's really important to stay in for me anyway, as a board member. I don't understand why that one was taken out. I guess just hearing from the committee. I do think it's important to get information from the CEO. I think we always talk about how we're the policymakers, and I think just getting that information, I don't know, I mean, that's, in my mind, one of the biggest jobs of the CEO is keeping us informed, getting us that information so we can make decisions as policymakers. So I guess more of a question for the board, why that one was struck, because I don't see that really in any other question, and that one's, just speaking as a board member, that one is important to me to leave in. So I understand the redundancy of other questions, but I didn't see that anywhere else.
Okay, I'll let Mr. Kennedy, and then I'll respond if I have something to add. Thank you.
Sure. So my recollection is, so we're talking about just to be clear, the board survey questions, number 8 on the board survey questions that was deleted. So there was an addition to number 7 that talks about effectively communicating with board members. And I think the thought was by making that addition to 7, it made 8 somewhat redundant. I know that was a big focus of the committee, was trying to pare these down and not avoid redundancy to the maximum extent they could. But certainly if there are, we can reword and try to pick up some of those things in 8 and incorporate those maybe into number 7.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be a stickler here, but that one I do think is a big function of the CEO, so. And then just, I guess, more of a comment, Madam Chair, is, and I understand, Board Member Chapman, I do think the staff survey questions are important, I think, just for the culture of organization. And I do think, even more so now that we have the organization coming in-house from ASM, and I know that's a huge undertaking for our CEO. That being said, I mean, I just think having that staff input at the executive level is important because they're dealing with our CEO, and also I think it leaves room for praise and for things that maybe the CEO doesn't know that could be different. So I just think those staff surveys from a cultural standpoint are important for the organization. But other than that, just want to thank the committee for the questions. I do think you guys did a good job in wordsmithing, paring this stuff down.
And it was a lift on the wordsmithing, wasn't it? I mean, all of you who were on it, we'd get tangled up in some of the verbiage. And Ms. Fraza, on your point on number 8, I think to Mr. Kennedy's points on number 7 saying, communicates with board members, and above that, number 6 really kind of addresses to how adapting to new information, changing conditions, is kind of tied into that a little bit. But for number 7, if just communicating with board members is not quite as robust as you would like to see, maybe we can look at wordsmithing that. And if communication to me is really includes everything. So whether it's providing us, number 8 got very the packets reports, it got too wordy and too what a communication for me is that he's communicating everything that we need to know, and however form that is not, I didn't feel necessary to spell out. But if it's adding, keeping them up to date on issues impacting the RCVA, it's still a part of the communication piece. But if we need a little more, if you want it a little more robust by kind of adding to that, what is communication without going down to the whole specific about so many, pre-board meetings, emails, CEO update. I mean, all of those, I think, should be understood. But if you want to, I understand where you're coming from. That communicates pretty broad, and understanding what communication means. And if we want to dial that in a little bit, I don't know, Mr. Murdoch, you're chair of this committee. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like I said, I think we tried to pick it back up in 6 and 7. Most importantly to me, and as chair, was the communication not only with board members but with the stakeholders, the tax base, and that would be the hoteliers and all the other businesses that I know that the RCVA deals with. So that was really what my whole thought was on these. But I'm open to anything as far as that goes. But again, we tried to pick it up in 6 and 7 because it seemed like we were 3 different questions there, had a little redundancy. That's all.
I think that my reasoning for wanting to be more specific, because we're talking about a merit review, I just personally, I wouldn't want it that broad. I think we should, but I think Board Member Murdoch, you bring up a good point, not just with stakeholders, but the public, how we get information out there, I think is important. So I just, I still believe we should put more clarity in that. I think it's too broad.
So do you think, and let me get some input from other board members too. If we went back to 8 and just kept the first statement, keeping board members up to date on issues impacting the RSCVA, shares appropriate information, and shares appropriate information, because then again, you're getting redundant after that and kind of into details that should be understood. Would that statement of keeping board members up to date on issues impacting the RSCVA and shares appropriate information, would that broaden it to your satisfaction?
I mean, I'm happy to listen to the rest of the board members, but it says, and demonstrate responsiveness to board requests for additional information.
So just taking the middle of that out. The middle of it is what, as we looked at, was the redundant part that, shares information, provides necessary information, packets, those were part of that we were trying to clean up. Can I get, Mr. Squawka, you were on the subcommittee, can you give me your input?
No, I was not.
No,
Full
I'm
disclaimer.
sorry.
Even though I do applaud the committee for going through this exercise, and now we can pick you apart. Actually,
That's right, it was Ann and Bob. I forget, because I sit on subcommittees with you. Which one
okay.
are we on together? Okay, that's right.
But while I have the
I'll
mic-
take your input, even though you weren't on the subcommittee,
Well,
that
and
works.
I do think, to Ms. Ferraz's point, I feel like you are picking some of that up. I think your intro, taking the front end of 8, again, I don't want to get into wordsmithing all of this, but I do think 6 picks up a lot of that second part of number 8 too. I don't know. I'm good with how it's put if we want to make some tweaks. Honestly, I appreciate that. I think we went from 24, 25 questions down to, more like a dozen to 13 and consolidated. I'll throw this out, and again, Monday morning quarterbacking is easy. For this, I'm fine. I do think moving forward, I would love to see these dozen questions kind of roll up into the CEO's main 3 or 4 planks of what the position entails, whether it's board communication. Basically, you'd have 3 or 4 of these questions that feed up to 4 or 5 overarching responsibilities that kind of give it some structure. Just taking it down to the dozen helps a lot, giving it a little more structure versus just wading through these questions. But I'm good with it. I feel like we're covering the importance of the communication and the follow-up and the responsiveness beyond just board, but if there's a better way to reword it, it'd be great to try to keep it down to the 12 or 13 questions if we could, but that's my comments. But I do want to thank the committee too. It's a heavy lift.
Okay, other comments? Mayor Shivi?
Thank you. Can you just clarify, because I think I was having sort of difficulty hearing on Zoom. So, Ben, one of the reasons, and it sounds like we can't ask all staff to take a survey. And one of the reasons, and I'll just tell you why I felt so strongly about this, because we did it with our city manager, and it's more, I honestly think it's better for a broad-based sampling, because maybe different departments have insight and then it's not so one-sided because it may or may not reflect, the organization. I actually think it's more positive that way. And so because of that, I just wanted to ask Mr. Harris if he would be willing to, allow that to take a survey of the entire team.
Yeah, so we're not agendized today to expand that survey. And to the first part of your statement, the reason that we've prepared it the way we have is because of what that contract says. And that was the process that was agreed upon when Mr. Harris entered into the contract, was just surveying executive staff. If we want to do that in the future, if we want to expand that, we can have that discussion with Mr. Harris. I'll note also, not as part of the review process, but there is a sorry, Mr. Zek, the Best Places to Work survey, that's a entire organizational survey that I'm not exactly sure which organization in town runs that.
So it's an independent survey. It's done by Northern Nevada Human Resources, facilitates Best Places to Work. It is, you have to ask to participate. Once you participate, survey questions are sent to the entire staff. In order to, you always, if you participate, you get a survey result from those regardless. But you are also, if you have a certain percentage of employees who are responding, and based upon those response, you can become a finalist. The RSCVA was a finalist in the past when they did participate in the Best Places to Work. Obviously, we've had quite a few transitions, as well as COVID and everything really changed the way Best Places to Work happened. So it was right before COVID that they were actually a finalist for Best Places to Work. And also, it also results with sometimes when we transitioned out, et cetera. But it's definitely an option, and it's actually something that Mr. Harris and I have spoken about. And so I suspect you'll probably get some of that information even outside of this review process.
Okay. We just found that direct reports sometimes, have such a different idea of sort of the CEO just because they interact differently. And so it just really kind of helps get an entire view of the organization where your culture really lies. So I would really advocate for that next time. So are you saying, Molly, that we should be, I think, what is that, Best Places to Work, that people can go there and fill out a survey? Is that what you're saying?
So the organization opts in to participate in the Best Places to Work survey. It's done annually. Again, the organization opts in. If they opt in to do it, then Best Places to Work sends the survey out and compiles all of that information through that third party. So it's done very blind. It's, and it is really highlighting exactly what you're talking about, more culture versus job performance. So if you look at the staff survey questions that you have here with these executive staff, they're really looking towards, that kind of more job performance as well as how well am I managed. As opposed to Best Places to Work is really about what is the culture. Are you a best place to work? What is your overall culture like? That goes to everything like which the board would be interested in, benefits. It goes to what is the communication style like amongst the entire organization. So it's not just necessarily about the CEO, as we know. It goes to all levels of management. Yes, everything flows up to that final point, but it really talks about those culture aspects on on the entire organization as opposed to just executive staff. So I think it's just kind of two different things.
Okay, so is that something that we, as a board, would say we want to participate in something like that? Because we do it at the city, and it's been amazing. And we were actually voted a best place to work when they just had their awards. So is that we have to opt into it as a board, or Charles, how does that work?
No, you don't have to opt in as a board. The organization, honestly, the HR manager would probably be the person who says, we're going to, in conjunction with Mr. Harris's approval, like, hey, I would like to do to participate in Best Places to Work. Dee Senac, who is the HR manager, is aware of Best Places to Work. She's aware of NNHRA and is familiar with that process.
Okay, so Molly, this is not a board action. This is something internally, which I think, obviously, all of us, whatever jobs we've had through our careers, really your culture and how you grow it or how you change it or how we all work together and all the dynamics that can change that for better or for worse, really make, and especially when we talk about retention and we want to keep people working for us and working with us, critically important to make sure that we're working together, that we're a team, that it feels good, we're positive and moving the direction that we all want to work towards together, and I think the value of that, cannot be understated, really. So I think that is something that is not necessarily would come back to the board, but I appreciate the discussion because there is, I would agree, Mayor Rcva, definitely there is value, and I'm all about culture and really embrace having positive culture that we can measure, and we can all work to improve if it needs improvements, or keep going if we're doing things right. So I appreciate those comments, and we'll let Mr. Harris work internally with HR, see if we want to go there to kind of give that broad base. Mr. Murdoch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of think, and I hope that Charles would view this as opportunity, because we've got records we're breaking records left and right. Our sales are good. Seems like we really have done some great things. We've took the middleman out, and it's going to help our financial statements. So there's a big positive message here, and being able to be able to use that as a to give Charles his good work. It's a statement that he's doing wonderful in our community, and it's positive, and hopefully, I believe with everything we're doing, it's very positive. So that's one of the reasons I would support that. It could be very beneficial.
Okay, Mr. Harris.
Rick, thank you for that. And I would tell you that it's not about a CEO or one person. It's about the team. And the team has done and had an amazing year. And I think I've tried to point that out all along. I do want to make one comment back, Madam Mayor, to your point. I think it's important that we continue to elevate the organization, what we're doing to create new messaging around all the positive things that are happening here, whether it's employment opportunities, promotions, Rick mentioned the records. If you recall, when I interviewed for this position back in August or September of 2020, one of the things that I mentioned was the goal of becoming one of the best businesses in this area, to your point. And I think that's still a goal, and that we're recognized. But part of that, and the long work that this whole staff has done, is getting policy in order, which we didn't have, getting the communications reset for both the board and the community, getting the records and exceeding those expectations. And so that was one of the things that I had mentioned when I interviewed to come here, and I still think that's important, and it's well beyond anything the CEO does. It's the function of the organization. It's the opportunities that are there. It is being recognized overall as an organization, and I think that is beneficial. And I think when we're in the right set to be able to do that to succeed, we will absolutely apply to that and be considered for recognition. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I just think from past experience, a broad-based sampling actually works in the favor of the CEO, and it also makes your entire organization feel really included. That's what we learned, with our city manager. So I just thought it would be a really great way to sort of, include everyone, because I think that's part of the culture of making everyone feel part of the team and not just some. And like I said, the broad-based sampling works in the favor of the CEO. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to do it. And I think Molly and I even had that conversation, that it does favor the CEO. So, that's why I wanted to bring it up, because that was the reason we asked for, the entire organization. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Kennedy, do you have some wordsmithing for us? Back to the business at hand. We have just one item that we're under discussion on item number 8. So, Mr. Kennedy, do you have some wordsmithing to do on that might work for Ms. Fraza?
Sure. So I think the request would be to put number 8 back in, but deleting that middle section. So number 8 would read, Charles Harris keeps board members up to date on issues impacting the RSCVA and demonstrates responsiveness to board requests for additional information.
Perfect. Okay. Does that work?
That's perfect, thank you.
Okay, so it cleans up all the middle that our intent was, but addresses what you're concerned of, making a little bit more robust on the communication and responsiveness to the board.
Thank you.
Okay, so Hearing no other comments or discussion, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the survey questions both for, we do both of them, right? We're not separating. For the Merit Board survey questions to the board and to the executive staff as amended with number 8, looking for a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Member Sferrazza. I have a second by Member Murdoch. Any other discussion? Okay, if not, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Wow, that was great. Rick, wasn't that easier than our second go-around for this committee? And not saying, the others, we need to have those discussions when people have other input. And I think what really helped in my mind was really the fact that we did ask for input before we met. So when we sat down, when the committee sat down, we had all of your thoughts from the board as the subcommittee sat down to try to craft something. And I think that made a good difference. It was another meeting. It was another 2 hours for the subcommittee, but I think it was worthwhile because we were able to really clean everything up, still meet the expectations and the priorities for the board, and come up with a much better survey questions than we had when we started. So I appreciate everybody's input on that and the work of the subcommittee in crafting it. So with that, we're going to move on to item G. Comments from the floor by the public. Do we have public comment?
None at this time, thank you.
No? Okay, seeing no public comment.
Madam Chair, just if I could, I know it's not on here, but did you want to say anything as a comment from the public about the subcommittee meeting on the 9th? For the special
I
events?
could, and I could add, yeah, we have, and announcements might be, before adjournment, maybe a couple of announcements of upcoming board meetings. Of course, the next full board meeting is September 22nd, but the special events subcommittee will be convening for the first time on September 9th at 9 a.m., correct, Lisa? Friday, September 9th at 9 a.m. for the subcommittee, and that will be an open public meeting also here. So we do have, and as for our community, just to update you all, community-wise, I was able to secure all 3 community members because we had some names, but they hadn't been vetted, and was able to secure Mr. Eric Edelstein will be our sports liaison. Geralda Miller will be our art liaison. And then we have, I just got confirmation that Patricia Richard, who's President Sandoval, Chief of Staff, who has extensive, and I didn't realize we had a conversation, she has extensive special events background that was really quite impressive. So she will be our university liaison to that subcommittee. So we have a committee ready to go on September 9th. And with that, seeing no further business, we're adjourned. That's not a very loud.